I find it fascinating where you look back in the past when you started and you see where you are now and how you got to that position. For me, I started doing streaming and playing video games, and I just did it for fun. And I've always been doing stuff like this for fun, right? And I think as far as doing videos and YouTube stuff goes, that's something you have to look at. You have to look at it like you want to do it just because you want to do it, not do it because you think of fame and money. That's the wrong mindset to think about, especially in this kind of, especially nowadays. Trying to get something like that is very, very wrong, in the sense that, wrong position and everything like that nature. But anyways, I wanted to take the moment of this time to kind of look back in the sense of like, it's funny how this particular game became part of my channel. This mobile game that for most people look down upon because it's a mobile game, right? It's the time versus money type of aspect. But there are people who play it, there are fans of it. This became somewhat of a cult thing, and because of it, there's a small fan base with it. Well, now, anyways. Back then, not so much. But I did want to take the time to kind of show my appreciation to this game by also kind of showing off something that I actually enjoy as far as the elements of it. Because this video probably is going to come out by the time the anniversary to this game's release happened. So this would be 6 years running so far. And officially, I should say, because I know it was released in beta, but officially worldwide was released back in May, the end of May. So it's funny how we kind of look at this and think what exactly kind of got people to kind of hook in here, right, with the elements and whatnot. And there are a few things about this game that I wanted to take this time to kind of look at why I like this game and what it is. And yes, one of them being the fact that it's based off of Goosebumps, which is like a really well-known worldwide, selling 3 million, like 300 million books worldwide, kind of thing. And probably have over-exaggerated that number, but I try my best, man. But for the most part, it's interesting that we kind of get to this point and just kind of wonder what makes this kind of sell out. And there's a bunch of stuff, right? There are things like the story, the characters, stuff of that nature, right? But then you kind of look at this and think to yourself, what makes this particular town builder game different from other ones? Especially coming from the same company, right? And you have to think about that because for the most part, most of the mobile games that has town builders, one of the critiques I have with them is that it doesn't really feel like a town per se. Like, eventually, later on down the line, if you get more characters, then it does help, right? Like, for example, here, like, oh, sorry, wrong one. Like, here, we have officially, as of right now, as to this date, we have 89 walk-around characters. And that's a lot of characters, right? Both monsters and humans and young and old. Different varieties of characters, so they kind of help flesh things out, right? But even then, that's not a whole lot of characters, right? You got problems, like, the only other game that I would say that actually fits this well is The Simpsons, but that's only if you played that game for long periods of time. That game's gone on for a decade, and there's a lot of characters that kind of added in there. But one of the other things that this game introduced that I actually enjoyed, that I wanted to feel the appreciation for, is the mechanic of these guys. The nobodies. These random NPCs, men and women, both young and old, wearing gray shirts that populates this place. Basically bodies, as it were, for harvesting scare points to help with this thing, the scarometer. But the reason why I like these characters is because they help flesh out the world. Most, if not anything, when it comes to any medium, you always have background characters. And these background characters are just not there. It's supposed to be not important. They're there to help flesh things out, to make it seem more filled out than it should be, right? And it's important to have nobodies like these guys. And the one reason I like about their designs is the fact that they wear very monotone gray colors, because it helps make them into the fact that they're just generic. They blend in. They're not supposed to be standing out. They're not supposed to be special in any way. But they're there moving around to help make this feel more lively than it should be, right? And I think there's another one here, a female, I think, if they're hiding from the tree. Yes, so there's an older woman here. So that's the other one. And it's a shame that we only got like men and women, both young and old, and we don't actually see kids that's like this, because this would have helped a lot. And it would have been interesting to see them kind of flesh this out more, to have more different random characters, like, you know, young women, like, you know, kids, men, and elderly in these type of forms. It would actually be fine. And yeah, there's a bunch of copy pastes, but, you know, they sell the purpose of what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be, you know, characters in the background you don't pay much attention to, but they're there just because. Now I want to see if I can find the last different female character. Should be around here somewhere. Yeah, there she is. There's another one of them. So yeah, these characters are interesting because they got introduced in the sense of making this world a lot more lively than it should be. And the way they introduced this is through here, the population. So there's a small residence, couples residence, and family residence. And by doing this, adds these characters randomly into your town. And by doing this, helps bring things more. The thing is, though, there's a limit to how much you can put down with the little bar up here. Like for now, my town is like 174. So really, I can fill this up as much as I want, so much I have space. And the thing is, important characters also fill that number role. And you can't really go over that because, you know, the way to expand that, you would have to expand through this. Gives you 1 or 2 extra characters, so you can actually have more people come in and go, which is interesting. But what I find fascinating about this whole aspect is the fact that I don't see any games that did something like this, where they add random NPCs. And, you know, they have the particular interesting idea of a crafting system here. Now, there are games like, say, this Family Guy, The Quest for Stuff, that has characters drop items, and even Snoopy does that. Well, I mean, Snoopy's the same game, but the one thing that this game has over other ones, especially with Snoopy, is this crafting mechanic where you take items and then you make new items or trade them in for new items, and this kind of shapes them up into other things to make it interesting and more engaging as far as adding stuff goes. But I'm kind of getting off topic. The main thing, though, is these random NPCs. Why do I love them so much? Well, like I said, they kind of do something to help a problem with this kind of game, especially when you first start this game. Like, if you play the games long enough, you get like a majority of good, decent characters to kind of make it feel like it's more alive. But when you first start, it doesn't feel like a town, does it? So they end up having the solution of adding these NPCs that all they do is they walk around and they get scared by the monsters. And because this game's so important, like their big thing is scaring people, because this game's supposed to be a horror game after all, kinda. So you would need extra bodies. Like, yeah, you can go and attack the main characters, but honestly, some of them are not scarable because they're monsters, or they just don't, they have no fear. So you would need characters that are just normal people that have nothing to do, and then they get scared regardless. So that's part of the interesting things. I do kind of wish they kind of expanded this a little bit more. This, like, interesting, this is like the thing that kind of makes HorrorTown stand out a little bit more. But they don't expand this at all, right? It would have been interesting to have more weird NPCs kind of walking about. I mentioned the kids before, like having, gray kids, like boy and a girl size. So it kind of makes it feel like a little bit more lively. Like instead of just the adults, there's also kids that are also, generic, that you don't really, they fit into the, you know what I mean? I think you do. But anyways, what I find interesting about this though is there has been talks before where it would have been interesting to add monster characters into this game. Like, can you imagine when the Horrorland kind of came out? Like imagine this, like if they actually had like a little, like, again, I'm just throwing these ideas out here, but it's just interesting to kind of look into this and think, imagine having a Krusty Land type of area, like a Horrorland in a sense, and instead of the monster instead of characters, humans, you get the horrors, and they walk around, and there's like male and female monsters, or zombies, they kind of walk around, and they're just normal people. Like, they're not there to scare people, they just want to live, right? They just walk around aimlessly, like, how Captain Dawes here wants to do that. Kind of like something like that. And then they also get scared from other monsters because, they want to live their lives too. Because that's the other thing too with this game. One of the lores about it is that Mayor Johnson, when he first started, she thought this was a normal suburban town. And then later on she finds out that there's a lot more monsters involved. And then she finds it strange that not only are people moving in despite the idea that there's monsters, but they did it because of that. So then she starts marketing it for the such, and she even goes ahead and mentions, I think, at some point, that even monsters move in, right? And, we got a bunch of monster characters, like, Ellie, for example, one of them, these more important characters based off of things from the books kind of thing, right? Like, that's what I mean. But it's been interesting to kind of have monster NPCs kind of walk about. And they've also had this idea of doing animals in a sense. There's only one character that we've had up and about that came out of nowhere at some point, which we mentioned before, which is Mr. Muffin's, Mrs. Mars cat. And at some point, yeah, so there he is. I made a little video about him at one point. But it's interesting too when you look at it, when you have, say, Mrs. No, not Mrs. Like, when you have previously, they wanted to make characters like, Cuddles and Trigger be NPCs, right? But they became characters, so, could have gray animals like cats or dogs kind of walking about, and then they also get scared. Again, it's interesting. They didn't have, they're not going to do this, of course, nowadays, because it's going to be a lot more effort to kind of put stuff like that in for no value, so they kind of want to focus on, it's a shame that this doesn't become a thing, but it's a nice little idea and kind of thinking about this kind of ramble on type of thing. But for the most part, it's just quite interesting that I've never had a game like this as far as town building goes. It's very unique, and it sells to the point, and this is why I kind of fell in love with this game in the first place. The story, definitely, but the gameplay as well. As much as most people look at it and kind of go like, oh, well, you don't play, there's not hours into the game. It's like, yeah, well, sometimes you don't need to do that. And my video is helpful because I record and kind of archive this type of things and kind of my mindset during this time. And it's just interesting to kind of look into this and think, yeah, it would be interesting to kind of have this idea kind of go through. And there's many different ideas, right, that we have that would be interesting to look into. But, for one reason or another, we just, we either can't or just wasn't able to do such a thing. But, it's neither here or there. But, yeah, it's just interesting that, we get random characters here. And what's interesting too is that some of these characters are not even canon in the sense, they're made up for this game, but it feels like characters that belong in the HorrorTown, but also Goosebumps lore when you think about it. Which is one of the things I actually like about this game, is that they can also be creative when they want to be. Yeah, the main focus is the books, and they're trying to bring, like, oh, it's based on this book, and from the, it's like, oh, it's the same characters and storyline and everything like that. But sometimes it's also cool to kind of come across stuff where they've made up a story and try to sell on an idea, like the elves from this year, or last year's Christmas stuff, and things of that nature. But, you know, it's just the generalness of it. But yeah, I just wanted to make this little video just kind of first saying happy anniversary, but also just to show my little appreciation, because this video is more or less just trying to talk about how I actually enjoy this type of stuff here, and one of the reasons why I personally am a fan of this game. So I want to know down below what you like about this game, what draws you into this game, and what kind of mechanics do you appreciate for that you might not take for, like you might have taken for granted. It's quite interesting to kind of look into that and go from there. I mean, yeah, and then the other thing too is that for the game's 30th anniversary, or not the game, the series' 30th anniversary, they brought R.L. Stine into the game, mind you, hidden incognito, but they brought him in there regardless. So there's that. But yeah, let me know what you think, and yeah, I'm just curious to see what you guys have in mind. But that's it for now. I guess we'll be back once an official event hits, which I'm hoping will be sometime, I mean, they say July, but I'm hoping kind of like maybe the end of June would be great, but I don't know. I'll keep an ear out and let you know if they actually tell us it's going to be ahead of time or ahead of schedule, but, you know, as we know, it's going to be the summer. Anyways, that's about it. So, see you in a moment, so until then, have a good one.